Hi, everyone. I'm Andrei, or as many know me, Andrei from LeFi or 0x Cerberus, as I used to be an Anon a few years back, probably like, most people who started in crypto. It was that, whole Anon culture back in the day. So today we're going to talk about liquidity aggregation, how liquidity is very, very fragmented, and how we're trying to unify this liquidity, and how the actual solutions out there are evolving. So it's not a big crowd. So I think that we can make this more engaging. If you want to if you want to interrupt me, I think it's enough people in the room so we can have a conversation around it. So I'll start with, when it comes to liquidity and, moving money from one blockchain to the other, what do we want? So we want for our assets transfers to be as smooth as possible, as reliable as possible, as fast and as cheap as possible. How do we want it? Well, we want it immediate. Without any sort of research, we want it out of the box. If you're on the dev side, you definitely want an API for this that has done all the heavy lift for you. If you're on the user side, you just want a front end where you can go at and do the actual swap. However, that's actually pretty hard. And I'll explain this through, by showing you the asset layer and how we got here today on having liquidity so fragmented as it is. So first of all, we probably all know that, first we had, an L1, Ethereum, with ERC20 tokens. So that's the L1 settlement layer. On top of that, we have the execution layer, because at one point, those L1s were too clogged and people wanted faster transactions, cheaper transactions to build more dApps. But then people realized that, well, actually, I want app-specific dApps that can do, for example, just lending or just swaps or just for gaming. So that's why we have the L3s that are scaling those. And then we had the message passing bridges. So we have, first off, we have the canonical bridges, which communicate, from the L1 to the L2 and the L3. But besides that, we also have different token standards, which we probably, most of us, I assume, saw, the OFTs or the XERC20 tokens, which are all from, different bridge providers that basically want to unify the liquidity that is already fragmented between the multiple L1s that we have. So, their value proposition is that use our message passing bridge and you will get unified liquidity. But the problem is there are 5 more other providers which are saying the exact same thing. So now you're getting just more and more fragmented. And we have also the assets. So we have the tokens, the NFTs, the RWAs that have to communicate with each other on all those, like settlement layers and the execution layers on, a dozen blockchains. Let's just assume that we're talking about the major ones. So now, those message passing bridges have actually built liquidity networks or third-party bridges. So Layer 0 has Stargate, Wormhole has Mayan, which are using those said token standards to help communicate with each other. So the whole point of this slide is that liquidity is so freaking fragmented that you don't know where to start. So are you starting, with a roll-up bridge, or are you going with an intent-based bridge or a liquidity pool bridge? You don't know. And also, trust lies on a trust spectrum. So we actually wrote this piece of research 3 years ago when liquidity was just getting more and more fragmented, because we realized that people need some sort of guidance on what bridges to use. They didn't know, one bridge is faster than the other. However, why should I go with, a roll-up bridge when I could just go with a bridge that works with liquidity pools? Well, that didn't work out pretty well, in some cases, because liquidity bridges, which were having the design of liquidity pools, were getting hacked. And it was never the actual user who was bridging getting hacked. It was the LP provider, which was putting their funds at risk. And we're seeing this also for the same chain swaps. So this is what we saw in the past month when it comes to same chain swap distribution. And by same chain swap, I mean swaps happening within the chain, not the cross chain one. The cross chain one, the chart is actually very similar to this one, in which there is no provider which wins more than 50% of the actual swap volume. However, those DEXs, they are very competitive on certain chains. So you'll see that, for example, that on Avalanche, Sushi Swap is more competitive than the others. However, on Mental, they're not competitive at all. Maybe they're not even deployed there. So all this, goes to the point that there needs to be a solution which has to be better than, just going through a lot of bridges and a lot of DEXs and a lot of DEX aggregators. And something that has been, a term that has been coined 2 years ago, it's intent and solver networks. And this industry has a huge talent for reinventing the wheel and, showing or representing things that were actually happening in TradFi for probably 20 years. But to oversimplify, like what an intent is, it would basically be a request for quote. So instead of going directly from blockchain A to blockchain B through a bridge, now you have a solver, and a solver in between is gonna solve for your intention. Your intention is to swap 100 USDC from Ethereum to 100 Optimism tokens on Optimism. How are they going to do that? Well, they have a lot of options to do that. One, they could have inventory here and here, so they would basically just front run or offer you just-in-time liquidity with their own inventory. Or they could have a very advanced routing algorithm in case they don't want to hold inventory risk and do your swap through different other bridge providers. So the exact same bridge providers that I mentioned here are the ones used by the solvers here. However, they can do it in a faster and more cheaper manner because they already have those sort of routing paths to the destination chain. So, it all sounds like a great idea for the solvers. The solvers, like at the first glance, you could say that, oh, they're a marketplace, because on one side you have them fulfilling the orders, and on the other side you have the order flow. So the intents who are offering the order flow. And by the applications that are offering the order flow, it's any sort of like swapping front end, bridging front end, lending and borrowing market, derivatives, and the solvers, on the other hand, you'd think that they would need an inventory list, a capability list, status monitoring, execution, fee taking, optionality. However, it's not really like that. Solvers are only focused on one thing and one thing only, which is the execution of the order flow that they're receiving. They are not interested in having inventory list on all the chains. Some of them are, but most of them actually don't care about that because they don't want to hold the inventory risk on their books. There are probably just a few big names which we probably all know, like huge market makers that can afford that sort of risk. So now we have two parts of the flow. So we have the applications which have the order flow, the intent order flow, and we have the solvers who are offering the execution. But in order to be a proper marketplace, you also need these plus a bunch of other features like fee taking or offering analytics to your clients. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg problem. It's exactly like if you want to be a marketplace like Airbnb, Uber, or Amazon, you need to force the market from both sides to come. Because the solvers can say, hey, we have the best routing out there, but they don't have anyone to sell it to. And on the other hand, the applications are saying that we have order flow, but we want to see the quotes. And the solvers can, if you're going back, like one doesn't work without the other. So in order to be a marketplace, you need, first of all, the aggregation. So you need all the asset list, the asset prices, the DEX aggregators, and the bridges. That's how we started 4 years ago. We actually started just by aggregating bridges on a front end because there were a bunch of DAX aggregators like 1inch, but there was no cross-chain aggregator, so an aggregator of bridges. And then we realized that like we're pretty good at aggregating bridges, but we need to aggregate DAX aggregators as well. Oh, and then we also need asset prices and assets list. So that's how we initially started, but we didn't have anyone to sell it to. So in order to force the market, we launched our own front end, Jumper.exchange, which was trying to, we were a B2B company. But for us, we had to showcase to our clients what the capabilities were. So we basically just built a demo showing people, hey, these are our capabilities, even though we didn't have any clients. And on top of that, then our clients are coming to us. We started to get bigger and bigger. We started to work with MetaMask, and they're saying to us that, yeah, but we also need a proper inventory list and a status monitoring of the transactions, because they can't just come to us every single time a transaction fails through one of the bridges. So we started with bridging, then we went to swapping, and now we're very much focused on arbitrary zaps. What arbitrary zaps are is probably, I think, it's going to be the biggest unlock in Web3 and Web2 since the old DeFi days, because it allows for the best of both worlds, which is swapping, bridging, and also doing any sort of action as a destination step in one transaction, so in one step. So a zap is basically, think of swap, bridge, swap, deposit. Swap, bridge, swap, open a loan, take a loan on Aave, or LP into any sort of pool. So by having those three together, it basically allows you to do any sort of action that you would want in Web3. So with those customers that we are very proud to have today, from like all the big wallets, Hyperliquid, Ethena, they're all using us for in some way or shape or form for swapping, bridging, or zapping. I like to give the example that if you ever done a transaction in Web3, it is very likely that you've used LeFi under the hood. Even though you might not have heard of us or seen us, or you don't even know the logo. If you deposited in Hyperliquid, it was us. If you have done a swap in Phantom or a bridge in MetaMask, it was us. If you're using Robinhood Wallet, then it was us again. So now now we have everything. We try to think that we're a marketplace. We have the aggregation, we have the customers. So we forced both in the same room together. We've built all the capability lists and the requirements that those said customers had for us, but we were just talking about the next big thing, which is solvers and cross-chain solving, and we incorporated that into our own marketplace. So we just acquired a few months ago Catalyst, which is a bridge, and we're building our own solver Pioneer. We're not building those to be more competitive per se. We're building those because we need to move fast. To build a marketplace, you need to move very fast. You need a lot of people. Think of, like Amazon in the early days. They just started by selling books, but they scaled so hard. They're now, like thousands of people in the company. We're 80 people right now because chain and bridge aggregation is very hard. What we do is, a price discovery of all the blockchains. So whenever we're going to a new blockchain, and that's why we needed the solvers, we had to knock at 51 other, bridges, or at 100 other DAX aggregators. Hey, are you gonna be on Bera Chain day one? Please come there. Okay, which one of our partners is gonna be there? Because we need at least two, because we say that we're an aggregator. So that's why we wanted to have our own solver to basically front-run liquidity for us and help us be faster on all those new chains. And besides that, the solver is great, but you also need an intent-based bridge. So we're gonna plug the solver into the intent-based bridge and allow for any other solver in Web3 or Web2 or market maker to plug into Catalyst to solve for and actually receive order flow. Yeah, and I'm getting to a point here But I want to show you, the whole application layer of how an intent system would work from both sides. And, like this is the matrix of what, a solver is doing. So this is like the best part of what a solver could do. So on one hand, they have access to centralized liquidity. So they have the OTC desks, they have their work, the OTC desks work with different market makers, which in most cases, they source liquidity from the centralized exchanges. On the other hand, the solvers do also have access to DAX aggregators and other solver networks. And all this, comes back to us because we aggregate, starting from here, we have the best of this part, we have the best of this part, and then we have the solver plugged into the Catalyst bridge, which offers us the ability to present this to, all the customers aforementioned. So the whole application layer thesis that we're trying to solve for is something that has been, in the debate for many, many years in crypto, because everyone is fighting for the same customers out there. And it's very hard. It's a very competitive landscape. And if you are not innovating, or if you're not keeping your prices as competitive as possible, you're just gonna die because, one of those clients could at any point go and work directly with a bridge or with a solver. So that's why we want to keep ourselves ahead of the game by, having the proper technology aggregated into this. So I'll, just share like a few words about the future roadmap for 2025, which includes multi-hopping, which by multi-hopping basically means instead of going from Solana to Ethereum to Base, you can go directly from Solana to Base in a multi-hop. So we bundle the whole multi-hop into one. Also, we're expanding more and more to non-EVM chains. We just added Sui, we added Solana, we added Bitcoin, and multi-hops also mean the exact same thing, which is basically, you can multi-hop from Sui to Bitcoin, which, no one ever thought of that, or, like we don't really have demand of, but still a multi-hop is you have to force the market to offer those said multi-hops to your clients. And solvers are a great use of that because they can take your intent and basically solve for it with the centralized liquidity from the OTC DEX and the centralized exchanges. Yeah, so this is it. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer. We can also talk more after the presentation. But in short, I think that the industry grows more and more and is getting a lot more mature when it comes to the actual liquidity layer and how liquidity is getting, less fragmented day by day. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Do we have any questions?
From what I hear, you're like a central part, aggregating everything that's on-chain, off-chain, whatever. How can I trust you? That I'm giving you money and I want Bitcoin in return. How can I trust you you're going to give it to me?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So we never hold the actual custody of your tokens. Us, as an aggregator, we work with the other third parties and they offer you the actual route. Now, when we have done the trust spectrum, that basically put us in a position of very heavy due diligence on seeing which bridges and which DEX aggregators are actually reliable for us to showcase to our users. But we don't actually hold the custody for your own tokens. We just price discover and offer you the best quotes. You get a list of quotes. You're like, this is the fastest one, this is the cheapest one, this is, a bit more expensive, but maybe it's a bit more trustless, depending on, what your choice would be.
Do we have any more questions?
What's your business model? How do you make it sustainable?
Yeah, sure. Very good question. Like we need to make money and we need to survive. We can't just burn VC money year over year. So how we make money is we take a fee per swap from the user. So whenever we're providing this API to MetaMask or like Phantom Wallet or one of those big partners, we don't charge the partner, we charge the user. So when the user is doing a transaction from chain A to chain B, or even a same chain transaction, we charge a few basis points out of that transaction. And doing a lot of volume, those basis points add up pretty quickly.
Any more questions? I have a question about the business model. Why did you decide to charge the user rather than one of your partners?
That's actually, it's a smart question because everyone in the industry is charging per API calls and we're charging at the user level. They started to charge per API call a lot later, like all the old DAX aggregators, and we wanted to differentiate ourselves between them by telling our customers, hey, you don't need to pay anything for us, no upfront, no cost for the SLAs, no cost for the API calls. We'll take those on us, and we're only gonna make money at the user level because we wanted to, like Uber back in the day, we wanted to grab and expand as much as possible. So we needed to, basically force ourselves into the market by having a better business model than the others. Is it sustainable? We'll see. I do think it is. Like if the volumes are high enough, and the basis points will just come. Like taking, for example, 15 basis points out of a few billions, it's millions already. So the business model makes sense if volumes are heavy.
And I have one more question about intent-based bridging. What's the role of the middle part? It wasn't a sender. The
Solver.
Solver, that's the one. Can you just elaborate on why is it beneficial to have a solver rather than chain A doing a direct bridge to chain B? And another second part of the question is layer 0, Brian has been criticizing the intent-based bridging a lot. I don't fully understand the technical details behind it, but can you just outline the drawbacks of it as well?
Yeah, well, you have to look like who's criticizing intent-based bridges and, what type of bridges they're running, which, for us as an aggregator, we don't pick winners. We think that you need bridges like Stargate and message passing layers like layer 0, but you also need bridges like across, which are an intent-based bridge with multiple solvers plugged in. And why do you want to, or what would be the benefits of an intent-based bridge using solver, or just by using directly a solver? Because sometimes solvers, they actually have their own front end. But remember, I talked about forcing the marketplace and the fact that it's very hard for them to grab more market share directly. The biggest benefit is it depends on what sort of architecture the solver runs off. Because if they run off an architecture as a market maker and they actually have the ability to source liquidity from centralized exchanges, they are gonna be, that means that they already hold inventory on the destination chain. So it's a lot faster and it's gonna be a lot cheaper because they already have the inventory there. So if you are on chain A and you want to do a bridge, they just need one confirmation here, and they're gonna release your funds there because they already have funds there, and they're gonna rebalance later. But not all solvers work like that. Only a few of them. Some solvers are actually glorified DAX aggregators, how I like to call them. It's a hot take, but they're glorified DAX aggregators because they don't directly do one swap through an AMM pool. They basically break down your swap into a dozen other swaps through multiple pools, which are a bit more, which have a better price. And that better price can maybe just be 1 or 2 basis points, but still for the user, it's a better quote. And in our own routing algorithm, that will show higher up than a bridge which is not intent-based. And the users really care about, they're very price sensitive. So even $1, it's $1. Why should I, give that to another bridge? And in most cases, solver intent-based bridges are faster because they have the inventory.
Thanks for that. Do you have any more questions from the public? One more.
You said you're aggregating real world assets. How can I get a quote on a house or whatever? What kind of real world assets do you aggregate?
So currently in the DeFi space, real world assets evolve around T-bills and TradFi derivatives. For the houses, there are actually a lot of protocols that are, putting real world real estate on the blockchain. But for us, in order to be able to aggregate and to pick up this liquidity, we need that liquidity to be available through one of the DEX aggregators or through one of the DEXs or through one of the solvers. So if the liquidity for whatever real-world asset you're looking for is on-chain, you will have it through LeFi as well. However, if it's something that it's a bit more centralized and they're just tokenizing something, but it's not on the blockchain, because you can tokenizing something is not new. It was called bonds, 20 years ago. Again, we have this talent of reinventing the wheel and new terms for things that were here. If it's just a bond, then and if it's not on chain, you don't have any access to it.
Do you have any more questions? I have a final question for you that's also very closely tied to your business model. First of all, do you believe that we will have gasless transactions and gasless bridging? And if so, do you believe the users will prioritize them, and then it'll be challenging for you to be selected as one of the aggregators because you have all the clients, but then you won't have the demand side, which is essentially the users?
So when it comes to the gasless transactions, this is also another benefit of working with intent-based bridges or with the solvers, because it's not that you're not paying for the gas is baked into the quote already. So you're still paying, like the gas cost is there, but you don't have to pay the gas or approve you only have to do one signature, which is allow for spending my money up to a certain limit from my wallet. So the money, is being taken out of your wallet and it's already baked into the solver fee.
I meant something like, I'm not 100% familiar on how they achieve it, but 1 inch is essentially covering for the transaction on the behalf of the user. And if transaction fees go so low, the other protocols are also willing to cover it. Do you think that your business model won't be as effective then, or you don't really worry about it?
So it's 1 inch fusion that you are talking about, which basically works in a similar manner like any sort of intent-based application, in which they have different solvers holding inventory already of 1 inch or their routing algos, and they bake in the gas fee into the quote. Now, by the fee being baked in, it doesn't mean that, like if gas would be $3, your transaction would be $3 more expensive. They can make money in the long run, so they can go on a loss for many months, and then at one point kill all the adversaries and then win that order flow back, that gas fees back. So it's not always going to be baked in into the actual quote. Sometimes it might be actually cheaper or a lot more cheaper to go through a solver based or an intent based bridge.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that. That was super useful for me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much.